Okay, today let's talk about the ethics of advertising and proper strategies in sales generation. So, what is advertising? Advertising is public communication aimed at large social groups to entice buyers to purchase a product. So, it's you sending a message aimed at large groups or social groups, your target market, to entice them to buy your product. So, this process of advertising is centered usually on satisfaction and creation of desire. So, that means you're trying to create satisfaction for your customer, or you're trying to convince them to have desire for your product. So first, what are the social effects of advertising? So we're going to cover psychological effects and its connection to waste. So psychological effects. Advertising gradually overrides consumer taste and convinces people of what happiness really is. So what advertising is trying to do is that what you normally like or dislike, they're trying to overcome that or override that by selling you a product or by telling you that their product is gonna make you happy. So, even though you have a preferred taste already, so for example, you like 3-in-1 coffee, okay? A company, for example, like Starbucks will promote like, no, that's not what you really want. This is, our coffee is better. That's what they're trying to tell you. They're trying to override what your consumer tastes are with their own product. So it usually leads to promotion of individualism and selfishness. So if you buy this, okay, it's gonna make you happy. Our product is gonna make you happy. It's important for you. You should buy it. It's really gonna be great for you. It's mainly focused on the singular audience. And promotion of advertising eliminates any mental aversion to prevention of consumption. What this means is that advertising is trying to remove those mental inhibitions or yung to get to that hurdle na parang hindi ka pa sure kung gusto mo siyang bilhin or not. Advertising is trying to override that so that you get convinced to buy the product. So it's trying to eliminate that mental aversion to prevent consumption, but it's trying to convince you to consume or to buy. Its connection to waste is first, production cost. When you're making a product is the cost of resources consumed to produce or improve the product. So resources again are limited and are consumed when you create a product. So there's the production cost. Though these are irrelevant due to the subjective nature of taste. Okay. Now when you talk about selling costs, these are additional sales to make additional expense, to make sales. So for example, rent or utilities. These are not really directly related to the product, but these are costs for you to be able to sell the product. And advertising is one of those costs. They're not there to improve the product, but they increase the sales. Okay? If, for example, you can have a really nice car, a 20 million peso car, but there's still some cost for you to sell that. Not all expenses go to the creation of the vehicle. Costs are meant to increase the sales, are not based on the product but the pitching. Okay, when you connect it to waste, advertising skews demand and forecasting. It means that advertising is trying to break that. If you remember economics, where as the price goes up, demand goes lower. It's trying to skew that demand and forecasting. It's trying to break away from conventional economic theories where advertising is gonna drive up, even if the cost is rising or it adds to the cost, it drives up more demand. Okay? But if advertising fails, it's what we call a sunk cost. A sunk cost is that money that's spent that can't be recovered anymore. So that's the risk of advertising, is that if you fail the advertising, it's usually just an expense that is very difficult to recover. Okay? When you talk about market power, this is advertising has the power to overthrow logic. Okay? To persuade or dissuade a consumer from purchasing a product. So it tries to break your logic. For example, if you don't have any money and you don't know if you're gonna get a new, let's say if you wanna get a new shirt from Uniqlo or a new jacket, advertising is trying to overthrow that logic to convince you to buy either through a sale, through an ad, or through a promo. It breaks the logic na I shouldn't spend, but to convince you to spend. Okay? And this usually serves as barrier to entry for less established products. Why? Because usually less established products have lower lower pricing, and usually they don't have a lot of um, money to spend on advertising. And advertising is a very costly venture for any company. You could spend millions and millions of pesos just to create an ad. Okay. Advertising effects on consumer desire. So how does advertising affect the consumer's desire? Okay. First, advertising is manipulative on consumer behavior. Okay. When we look at the physical basis of desire, this is basic needs that we need. So, for example, it's very hard to manipulate people from buying their basic needs or from dissuading them from buying basic needs. Okay, why? Because they're basic needs. They're what your body needs. If you would remember the pyramid, Maslow's pyramid, you have to be able to have at least the physiological or the physical desires or the basic needs met before you can start to care about other needs you may have. Okay, so when it comes to, for example, food, water, hygiene, they're usually immune to manipulation. You don't need a lot of advertising to convince consumer to buy those products, because naturally people will look for products such as this. But when you're looking at the psychological basis, so some things that pertain to social, cognitive, and personal development needs, advertising plays a huge role because they're trying to convince you about things that you don't typically need. Okay, for example, asset review or entrance school review. Okay, it's not a physical basis of desire. If you don't meet it, it's not that you're gonna die. For example, so hindi naman like food. If you don't consume it or if you don't buy it, obviously you're gonna have a very difficult time. But for things such as reviews, school, these are social, cognitive, and personal development needs that they have to convince you to buy or to purchase. Okay, advertising can expand, manage, or control desires, but producers use the data to expand demand by manipulating desires. So they use advertising to be able to manipulate you into buying the product or to expanding your desire for the product. Advertising's purpose is to arouse psychological interest in a product without the consumer's awareness. So they're trying to convince you, okay, psychologically, to have interest in their products, that it's something that's gonna stick in your head. Na you could see a billboard advertisement for, let's say, asset reviews or entrance school reviews, and then later on, maybe when you start thinking about the things that you need, na it might be best to further studies, you'll suddenly remember the ad. You have that ad. Oh, I saw an ad niya pala about entrance school reviews. Maybe I should try it out. Okay. So, advertising is very subtle when it comes to arousing your psychological interest. Next is advertising's effects on beliefs. Advertising can be both truthful and deceptive. Okay? It's prone to misinterpretation as it can skew a person's perception of the truth. And sometimes it creates unreal expectations about the product, leading to a biased view of the firm. So first, it's prone to misinterpretation because there are some things that are, for example, let's talk about Safeguard. Okay, Safeguard is soap, and it tells you that it can kill germs and stuff like that. Okay, which is very truthful in a way, but sometimes it can skew a person's perception of the truth when we misinterpret it as it can be the number one, that you only need Safeguard to prevent all diseases and viruses from affecting you. Okay, and sometimes it does create, for example, again, let's take the Safeguard example, unreal expectation that even though it's just a normal or a good brand of soap, it can't really prevent a lot of the things we believe it to prevent. For example, we don't know, hygiene is important, but stocking up on alcohol and just washing yourself in alcohol will not prevent diseases, or for example COVID-19. It's not gonna prevent that. It helps, but we can't expect hoarding alcohol is gonna really do anything significantly that can prevent COVID-19. Clients are not assured of getting what is promised to them. Advertising tends to go beyond what's truthful. Okay, so we don't, for example, they could advertise a new car from an unknown brand. Let's say Jerome's car, okay, or Jerome's Auto. Okay, we can promise them that it's gonna be the most comfortable thing. It's a very comfortable ride. It can save you a lot of gas. Okay, the mileage of this is blank blank blank. But clients such as you, if you buy my car, you don't really are not assured that this is true. It could be that we've done manipulative things, such as we tested in the perfect environment for the vehicle, but not really in daily life. So it is important to know where the deception begins to identify when advertising is unethical. So it's important to know what is exaggerated and what is truthful in the advertisement, as most advertisements really do exaggerate on to arouse interest. So there are three elements of communication when we talk about advertising. There's the author, the person who creates the communication, the medium of communication or the media, and the audience. You guys are the target audience of the message or the author. So first, the author. This is the person who intends to deceive or to has the moral culpability over the act. So the deception is deliberate if, for example, the advertisement was meant to just entice you to buy a product even though it's promising unrealistic things. That's the time where the person has moral culpability. Okay? When the author himself is already deliberately trying to deceive you through the advertisement. Okay? Not saying that this is all true, but sometimes they do have an intention to deliberately deceive the audience. Okay? So the moral culpability over the act falls on the author when it's very deliberate already, when they intended the advertisement to deceive. The medium is responsible for what is transmitted to the public. Okay? And middlemen can be forms of medium. For example, I get agents. So when you're at the mall and you see people selling cars, usually may mga agents dyan. So I can tell them na, sabihin nyo na ito yung mileage, ganito kaganda yung kotse ko, benta nyo lang siya. But as a middleman, the middleman still has a responsibility. Though, pag alam niyang deceiving or deceitful yung advertisement, he still has the moral culpability to advise the person na hindi naman lahat totoo, okay? And it can fall on him pag ginawa niya pa rin yung untruthful thing or if he still deceives. The audience can also be at fault when he himself allows herself to be fooled for very obvious deceptions, okay? So people still have the responsibility to filter information and make decisions. Okay, so you have to be very cautious also because you can also be at fault in a way na obviously it's not your intention to be deceived. But you have to exercise caution also when you're filtering information. You have to do your research, and it's much more easier now because we have the power of the internet, customer reviews, to be able to avoid getting deceived. Okay. Now, there are certain questions we can ask to determine the ethical nature of advertising. The first one, what does the advertiser intend the effects of the advertising to be? Is it just so that to promote? Okay, these are the social effects. So, is the billboard just meant to entice people to buy the product, let them know na this product exists, and what are the actual effects of the advertisement on individuals in society as a whole? So, what are the actual effects of putting that advertisement out? Okay, for example, if it's your intention to just promote the product, you can just make a simple ad. But what if the ad was about skin whitening soap and you mistakenly end up convincing people that white skin is better? It can have adverse social effects. So, pwedeng people might feel bad that they have dark skin, okay, that they're not the image of perfection according to your ad. So, there are the intended effect would not always be the real effect. So I could have created the ad to just convince people that my soap can help them to lighten their tone, but the actual effect is I accidentally shame people for having dark skin. Now, effects and desire, does the advertisement inform? So is it just a simple information, or does it also seek to persuade? If it's persuasive, does it attempt to create an irrational and possibly harmful desire? So again, going back to the whitening soap example, if you're trying to convince people to buy your product, to have them have lighter toned, is that persuasion creating a harmful desire that they have to get all these, that aside from using your whitening soap, magpapa-opera sila, magpapa-inject ng gluta, okay, things like that can be harmful to them because you created an harmful desire. And the effects on belief, is the content of the advertisement truthful? Are you still being truthful in your advertisement? Okay, or are you trying to mislead people? Does the advertisement have a tendency to mislead those who receive its message? So, it could be that wala naman talagang effect yung gluta soap mo kasi it's proven not to do anything helpful with lightening skin tone. So, yeah, you just intend to exaggerate or mislead your audience so that they would still buy your soap. Kasi it's more costly to develop a new product. Okay? So, does the advertisement have a tendency to mislead when you're trying to persuade? Kasi sometimes advertisements do try to mislead the audience to persuade them to buy. Okay, so these are the things that you ask yourself when looking at advertisements, and advertising ethics is very important because there are ads that are very questionable and that must be looked at with a grain of salt or through lenses where we can evaluate if the ad is still being truthful or are we being misled as the audience of the advertisement.